Hello again, Gills fans. Welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Blood TV. It is match preview show time. And for the second time this season, I'm pleased to announce that I'm joined by Barrow fan Taylor. You can find him on Twitter at TaylorBAFC. Nice and simple Twitter handle to remember there. So that's where you need to go if you want to find out everything to do with Saturday's opponents. Saturday's opponents that drew 1-1 in Kent in the reverse fixture back in October. Imagine it'll be a very different Gillingham team, a slightly different battle. But Taylor, first of all, appreciate you coming on, and second of all, still thriving in League Two, still having a brilliant season after being written off by many at the start of the campaign as relegation fodder.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Thanks for having me on. But yeah, this season has been a complete sort of 180 to where we've been the past two seasons. I think obviously a lot of people obviously had us towards the bottom this season, and probably rightly so, given where we've been the past couple of seasons. Um, but I think there's been so much change in the summer that I don't think people would have realised. We've really professionalised as a club, both on and off the pitch. We made a really smart appointment in Pete Wild. I think people are already, eyeing him up as someone that other clubs want as their manager. Obviously, there's quite a bit of interest, I believe, around him already. A lot of people would like to have him as their manager. But I think that was a really smart appointment that came at the right time for us. But we've really professionalised off the pitch, and the way we've done that, it can't be understated. We were operating as probably a non-league club within the Football League the past couple of seasons. So that improvement off the pitch has been vital to what we've seen this season. So it's really a combination of many things as to where we are at the moment. But it's been a real delight to see where we are this season, a massive contrast to the past couple of years.
Totally understand what you're saying, and like you say, it's a massive overachievement. Let's not pretend otherwise. And again, like you say, in terms of, I've seen a couple of grounds this season. Obviously, being in League One last season, you was going to places like Stadium of Light and Bratton Park and that type of thing. So there is a big difference in terms of facilities. But yeah, I think the ground that I've been to, you say, was the most non-league would be Sutton's Gander Green Lane. Loved it though, absolutely loved it. Brilliant little football ground, brilliant little setup. And again, like yourselves, they're having a brilliant season as well. Um, we'll get on more onto Pete Wild later in the show. I want to look at recent form before we get into anything else. So we'll have a look at the last six for both sides. There's 18 points available in the last half dozen, and both sides have taken 11. Um, Barrow, 3 wins, 2 draws, and a defeat. Gillingham, 3 wins, 2 draws, and a defeat. And if we break that down a little bit further into home and away, Pete Wild's Chargers have picked up 8 from 18 in the last 6 home games. So that is 2 draws, 2 defeats, and 2 wins. Gills slightly under that with 6 points from 18 over the last half dozen games. 2 defeats, 3 draws, and a solitary win. I think was at Rochdale. I've noticed though, Taylor, in your last 6, you've played a few teams that we've played recently as well. You've played Stockport, you beat them 1-0. We drew 0-0 with them. You beat Walsall 1-0. We've recently lost to them by 2 goals to 0. Wimbledon, we've both beaten 2-1 in recent weeks. Yours as recently as last weekend. Both scored 5 and conceded 3 in our last half a dozen games. 3 clean sheets for you lot and 4 for us. So everything points to a tight game again, like it was at the Priestfield back in October now. Feels like a lifetime away as a Gills fan after all the changes we've had in recent months. But just quickly back to that game. We just said off air before we started recording, I thought you was the better team comfortably that day and deserved to win. You missed a penalty, you took the lead, and I think we scored from a corner and didn't really threaten apart from that. What's your memories of the game? Did you attend that one or?
Yeah, I did go to that one. Yeah, I think you've summed it up pretty well. I think we did look the more in control team of the two, and we probably should have come away with 3 points. But as you say, we missed that penalty, and not taking chances like that, it gives the opposition an opportunity to get themselves back in the game. All you need is one goal in order to get something out the game, from a 1-0 lead. So the fact that obviously we didn't convert that penalty proved to be costly. And as I say, you only needed that corner. So for as much as our pressure and sort of deserved victory on the day, as you put it, we didn't take the chances, and rightly so. You've come away with something because you converted the same number of chances we did.
That's it. And you see all these podcasts and shows and channels that have all these things about XG in terms of goals and XG for assists. It's always the most important one, isn't it? And that's goals scored. You can
Exactly.
have all the possession in the world, but it means nothing if you don't stick the ball in the back of the net. Um, let's talk about Pete Wild then in more detail. You've sort of glossed over him at the start of the show. I think when we spoke back in the autumn, obviously he was only 4 months into the project, having taken over, I think, at the end of May after last season.
Yeah.
I suppose he was still trying to find his feet. You, as a fan base, were trying to work out how he wanted to play, what his preferred systems were, type of football, whether he's going to be direct, keep it, that type of thing. We now fast forward 6 months to the end of March. And like I say, technically you're lower in the table, I think, than where you were when we played you, but it was over a much smaller segment of the season back in October. To be 10th with 8 games to go in the campaign, as we've already touched on slightly, is a massive overachievement for a club of Barrow's side in terms of stature, fan base, budget, all that type of thing. And it's almost like it's a real fairy tale type story. I think he was at Halifax, Oldham before, Pete Wild,
Yeah,
with
that's
sort of
correct.
mixed success, working under various constraints, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Just how high do you think Peter Wild can go? Obviously not yet, because you don't want him to be leaving halfway through a project. I get that entirely. But you mentioned there's been clubs interested. I think was there a couple in League One in recent weeks that have sacked their manager that were interested in maybe sort of trying to approach him. Have I read that correctly, or have I just dreamt that up?
No, that is correct. Yeah,
Was
there is some
Oxford one of them?
interest. I think there's been rumours of Oxford. There's been rumours of Peterborough. So of interest, whether it be now or in the summer, there is interest there from those sort of clubs.
Interesting, Peterborough, isn't it? Because relatively speaking, they're having a good season. I know they're quite a big fish in a League One pond, but I think they're in and around the playoffs.
Yeah.
Oxford, you can understand, sat their manager struggling, trying to get out of a relegation battle. But it's an interesting one, that type of club, isn't it? Because I suppose as a Barrow fan, you'll be saying, well, why does he want to leave a club on an upward curve in Barrow, 10th, still with an outside chance of gate crash in the top 7, however small, to then go to a club that essentially could be back in this division last season and on something of a downward momentum. I guess I'm trying to ask sort of what are your hopes? I know you want him to stay, I get that, but looking further forward, maybe into next season, because as an outsider, I certainly think the playoffs are a long shot now. You played extra. And I think I read or listened to a podcast that said, unfortunately, you're not playing any of the teams above you. So it's going to be more difficult to reel them in. Because if you play them and beat them, you're essentially taking 6 points off them. But you haven't got to face any of them teams
Mm.
that you're trying to chase down. So is it fair to say playoffs are a possibility rather than a probability now? And then the second part of the question would be, what do the hopes for 23-24 then become?
Yeah, I think you are right. It is definitely more of a possibility at this point. To be in this position it is still absolutely brilliant. The past couple of seasons we've not even uh, we struggled to get towards even 50 points. So to be in a position where we're already over that
Mm.
magic number, and to now sort of be able to reassess our expectations for the season, and even have a possibility of looking at the playoffs is fantastic. We can't write ourselves off. There is still an opportunity there for us to possibly get across the top 7, as little as it appears to be at the moment. The next 3 games, obviously, is yourselves, Crew, and the other one escapes me. But we've got another game that I think we need to be looking at trying to win. Is a huge opportunity to try and get 9 points in our next 3 games.
Home
So if
to us, then you travel to Crewe, then Crawley at home.
Crawley at home, that's the one. So it's 3 games where we can be looking at trying to get 9 points. And if we can get those 9 points, then it increases our opportunity of the playoffs tenfold. Um, but as you say, we're not playing the teams that are in and around those playoffs. So it does leave us at a bit of a disadvantage, I suppose you could say. But we see where we go in these next few games. If we do manage to get 9 points, then who knows where that can take us. But from a realistic perspective at the minute, to even be 10th in the division and looking at possibly getting top half come the end of the season is still a huge you know a huge boost for us, and a massive what's the word, a huge, the words escape me.
I know what you
um
mean. Yeah, like a
yeah,
feather in the cap type thing. Yeah,
but
for a
yeah,
club
it's a
that's
massive,
gone above
it's a
and
mass
beyond what
yeah.
everyone was expecting. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we've done fantastically, and I think come next season we need to try and look at pushing on from this. Um, it's going to be a huge ask to try and push into the top seven, because we do have to be realistic about where we are and who we are as a club. There
Hmm.
are a lot bigger clubs, a lot bigger budgets, and each season is going to be harder and harder because that tends to be how football's going.
Hmm.
The more and more money is coming into this game, and the harder it gets for clubs like us who are arguably punching above our weight at the moment.
And do you think
Um,
it's filtering down further now, isn't it? The
it is
saturation of the
definitely,
money's dropping. Before it was the
definitely,
Championship was second Premier League, but now you see all them teams like we've already mentioned, the Sunderlands, the Portsmouths that are in League One. But then you've got massive clubs in this division, relatively speaking, like Bradford have played in the Premier League, Tranmere, massive following, Stockport, maybe Wrexham next season, that are all established football club league clubs historically that are going to have big budgets. Dare I say that potentially include us in that. Now, in terms of bigger budget, we don't know just how much yet because we've only seen one transfer window, but the signs from a Gillingham fan perspective are certainly encouraging on how one window went. So yeah, totally understand that you've got to strike while the iron's hot, so to speak, and really take advantage now of what is going on at Barrow. And I suppose the best way to do that is to say, well, this is our project. You come and play, you're going to play all the time, and we are a club that's forward thinking and becoming more professional, and then hope that it snowballs.
yeah, you are right in that. But at the same time, whilst we're talking about the pyramid getting stronger because of the money that's coming in, typically you look at the newly promoted teams, the teams that are going to be towards the bottom end of the division, but you're looking at Wrexham and possibly Notts County who are going to come up in the playoffs, the top two, and I can't see either of those teams being down there next season. So it shows that even the clubs that are typically due to be sort of the weaker teams, the teams that are going to be towards the bottom end of the division, are typically going to the ones that are down the bottom are probably going to be further up, and it shows the strength and depth of the footballing pyramid at the moment, and how money is having a huge effect, and how it's being dropped down into the pyramid. It's not just the opening two divisions, not just the Premier League and the Championship. It is filtering its way down the pyramid, and there's going to be it's for me, it's only going to continue to go that way. There's going to be teams that are coming up from the National League, and they're going to be in a position to spend money and then really push on in League Two.
Yeah,
So
you're right. And even if you look at the two teams that came up from last season, I think was Stockport. They're currently chasing down the top three still, which I think everyone sort of envisaged. And you can see, like you say, at Wrexham or Notts County, or both potentially doing the same sort of thing next season.
yeah,
If they both do end up in the league, they could just go straight through because of fan base, budget, that type of thing. And even Grimsby, who went up through the playoffs. I know they're 15th now, but they've had an unbelievable cup run in the FA Cup to get to the quarterfinals before bowing out to Southampton. It's only 6 weeks ago before they had all these games in hand and a bit of a fixture pile up that people were talking about them as an outside bet for the playoffs with all their games in hand. So it's two teams that have come up and thrived rather than struggled. And that always tends to be the way, I think, doesn't it? It's very rare that you see teams come up from the National League and go straight back down.
exactly. Yeah.
Yourselves
Even
being a prime example as well. Harrogate.
Yeah, well, exactly. Even when you had sort of teams that were coming up through into from the National League that probably didn't have the money that they do now, they were still in a position to really push on in League Two. So now having this extra money to is an extra boost for these teams that are going to come up to push on even more. So the gap, I don't think the gap was ever that big, but the gap has really minimalised with the money that's come into the National League. The gap's just getting smaller and smaller in terms of quality. You can probably say that X amount of teams in the National League could easily step up into League Two. Um,
And League One, dare I
Even
say.
now,
Some of them. I
um,
think some could step straight into League One based on the structure they have in place.
I think you're exactly right.
And also, you have to look at, I mean, like ourselves as a prime example, recently, there's more and more foreign owners coming into the bottom two divisions because, well, essentially everything's been taken in the Premier League and the top end of the Championship. So they're now having to look further down. And we had this chat at a question and answer session with our new owner back in beginning of this month, I think it was, or the first one in January. And one of the questions asked to Brad Gallinson was Gillingham your first choice? And he said, no, we looked at Premier League clubs and we were all like, how much money has this fella got if he's able to look at Premier League clubs? But it wasn't even just football clubs he was looking at. He was looking at franchises in American sports to start with before sort of venturing into Europe. And the big attraction for us is only club in the county that's in the Football League. So we've got, thousands and thousands of potential sponsors to get involved with, and he's utilised it really well. But yeah, it just seems to be that there's more and more. You look at, I know Crawley's gone horribly wrong and it's gone the other way, but if you can be like a Gillingham that looks to have fallen on its feet, then obviously that's how you then take the next step. So do you think maybe that would have to be something that Barrow look towards if they do want to push on even higher, to look at maybe not being taken over, but at least some sort of investment?
Yeah, I think we have to realise where we are as a club with all
Mm-hmm.
these uh, takeovers happening, with all these people coming in with the money. We do have to realise where we are as a club. Our owner is a local accountant,
Mm-hmm.
local to the area, supports the club, and he has X amount of people that are on board with him that have invested their money to help out.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have to realise we are probably an exception to the rule in terms of where football's going at the moment, with all these takeovers and people coming in with the money. We are probably that exception to the rule, and I think where we are as a town, as a club, I don't think we necessarily have the ability to pull in these owners that everyone else that seems to be doing. Um, we probably aren't as attractive as all these clubs due to location and various other things. I mean, we have to train in Manchester to pull in players, rather than in Barrow. It's a horrible place to get to. So we have to try and work around sort of the geographical factors in
Mm-hmm.
order to try and pull people in. And if that's players, that's management, that's investors. And I think that's probably where we are as a club. It's always going to be more difficult for us to try and pull in these owners. So I think we're always going to be that sort of team that are punching above our weight, because I don't think we'll ever pull these people in the same way that you guys have. But I'm happy to do that. You know, if that's how it's going to be, that's how it's going to be. But um, this season is a massive reason as to how we can progress as a club. I
Sure.
mean, we're fighting against the odds this season, so why
Oh
can't
yeah,
we
and it shows
continue to
that
do that?
there's more than one way to skin a cat. I totally get that. But it'd just be interesting. To be fair, we didn't think that anyone would touch us after the last 18 months of being relegated and the first 50% of this season where we couldn't score a goal, let alone win a football match. You're thinking, why is anyone going to want to touch us? We were going down. Let's make no bounds about that. If we'd not been taken over, we didn't have the finances to get ourselves out of trouble. We'd be National League next season. But obviously, we want to look at the more immediate rather than Barrow's long-term future, as interesting as it was. And I appreciate all the information. Um, we're recording this on a Wednesday night, like I always do, so there is no press conferences to go off of. They are usually done on a Thursday for most clubs. But I want to talk about danger men that Gillingham are going to look out for come Saturday, 3 o'clock. Obviously, Josh Gordon jumps off the page if you look at stats for Barrow this season. He's got 12 in 30 in the league, so he's going along at just under one every two, which is a really good record. You're looking at 16 league goals a season, which is great. But aside from him, if you had to say to Gillingham fans trying to find out who we've got to keep an eye on, who would say be two other people that we've got to keep an eye on for the duration of Saturday's game?
Yeah, I think you've obviously took stock in Josh Gordon, which is absolutely right. He really does stand out on a page in terms of goals, but I think at the same time, Ben Whitfield is enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think he has the most assists in the division. So he's a real standout as well for me. I think in the past sort of few weeks, he's possibly looked a bit of a shadow of himself.
Okay.
Um, but he has still been picking up assists and chirping in with goals and assists now and again. So
12 for the season.
well,
Blimey. Yeah, I've just got
yeah,
his stats up on transfer market. 37 appearances, 5 goals, 12 assists. So you're looking at, again, similar to Gordon, but if you do it over contributions, it's just under 1 in 2, which is a phenomenal record. For someone who's
exactly.
not playing up front, he's a midfielder by trade.
Yeah. Well, he was a huge. I think he was a huge part to our strong start to the season, and I think he's sort of died down in the last few months, but he's sort of picking his way back up again. So hopefully, again, we'll see the best of him come weekend.
Mhm.
Um, he's a great player. He works hard, constantly running, chasing down balls. Um, I think we scored a goal towards the start of the season where I think 9 times out of 10, the ball that he chased down to keep the ball in. I think most players would give up and just leave that ball and let it run out of play. And he chased that ball down, kept it in play, got the cross in, and we scored. And I think
Mhm.
that just epitomizes the sort of player he is. And I think we'll see that on Saturday. The same way we have most of the time this season. So for me, he really stands out. And I think defensively, I think now Canavan, the captain, has been a real strong player throughout the season.
Scored last
Very,
weekend, didn't he? Didn't he get
he
the
did,
equaliser
yeah,
against Wimbledon?
he did, yeah. Very rarely puts a foot wrong. Strong, constantly winning headers. Very difficult to beat in the air. A real captain. I think a lot of the time we've lacked that as a club. We've lacked a real captain in recent years, but we seem to have found that with him. He's a real good leader. You always hear him out on the pitch. He'll guide sort of players as to where to go, what to do. But I think he's a real strong part to our defence. And I think our defence generally, on the most part, bar a few games where we've shipped quite a number of goals, once or twice this season. I think generally on the most part, we've looked quite strong defensively, and I think he's been a real integral part to that. And I think again, come Saturday, he'll be a real rock.
There we go then. 3 to keep an eye on, Gills fans. Um, Talking of your defence, because I was looking through a couple of apps that I use that are free, so not always entirely accurate. But in your last game, it had you down as a 4-2-3-1. Is that correct? But it looked predominantly like you play a back three, or was that just an anomaly on the app? Because the rest of your games, it looks like you play either like a 3-4-1-2 or a 3-4-3.
Yeah, so the formation does change. In recent weeks, it's sort of changed around a little bit depending
Okay.
on personnel. So depending on how we line up, then that'll change. So I think sometimes we have gone for sort of the back three with wing backs to push on.
Hmm.
So if you do see McClelland, Canavan and Ray as in the starting 11, then it'll definitely be a back three with Brough and probably Feely or Warren as wing backs.
Okay.
But I think at times we've also gone for just the 4-4-2, the 4-2-3-1. So I don't think there's a definite formation that we'll go for. It'll depend on the personnel that go into the team. There's not going to be a strict. Couldn't tell you for definite now what that's going to be. It'll depend on how we line up on at the weekend. And obviously then we'll see if it's going to be a three at the back or probably the 4-2-3-1, which yeah typically has been the go-to formation this season.
So is that something
Typically,
that Pete Wild can change during the game? So you might play two systems within the 90 minutes, even if without making
yeah,
changes, if you've got that flexibility.
yeah. So come last weekend, we had Harrison Neal on the pitch, Tom White. So it's more two holding midfielders
Right.
initially, and then Robbie Gotts came on, and then it sort of pushed into more creative players rather than the two holding midfielders. So obviously, depending on who comes on, who comes off, then that'll change as well. We'll see either a bit more defensive or a bit more offensive.
Fair enough. In terms of team news, like I've said, it's very difficult to gauge at the moment. But for Gills, we've not seen anything come out of Saturday's win against Carlisle. We've not had a game in the week this week, which is good. It'll give a few of them the Neil Harris keeps talking about the captain and calls him the old boy. Sean Williams has been absolutely immaculate for the best part of 3 months since the takeover now. So I can't see a reason why Gills would change their 11 after beating third in the league, well, fourth after we scored in the last minute, but third at kickoff at least. So I can't see, unless there are injuries, why Neil Harris would change it up. So I'd imagine we'll come up and play a 4-4-2. So I think that would be Glenn Morris in goal. Back four would be Shay Alexander, Maxime O'Connor Masterson, and Robbie McKenzie. Midfield four would be from right to left Alex McDonald, Tim Dieng, Sean Williams, and Aidan O'Brien. And then it'd be Oliver Hawkins and Tom Nichols up front, I think. The old adage, if it's not broke, why try and fix it? I think so. It'd be. But then again, if he might come up and show you respect because you're a good side, you're in the top half, and this is what we've spoken about in recent weeks. The transfer window immediately allowed us to beat teams in and around us at the bottom. We was beating, Hartlepool, Colchester, Rochdale, who else was Crawley Town. And then we drew at Harrogate and we didn't concede a goal in any of them games. So then the next step was trying to beat teams in and around mid-table, and we've beaten Tranmere, Wimbledon, Grimsby, Crewe. Last Saturday was the final step of starting to compete with teams in the top 10, the top 7, the top 4 or whatever. And we did that. We were much better than Carlisle and we deserved to win as well. It wasn't a fluke. So it's now whether we can go away to a good side like Barrow and pick up 3 points. Final question, Taylor, before I let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening. There's that ghost of yours again that you did on the last episode. I'm assuming it's your cat.
The dog this time.
Oh, it's the dog this time. Makes a change. Rest and rotate like any good manager. Score prediction. Who's going to be smiling? Who's going to be fed up come 5 o'clock? Or are you going to sit on the fence and we'll both be okay?
Yeah, I think I have looked at your away form and I've noticed that it's not really picked up throughout the season. You've got the odd result here and then lately. But I think we do need to be looking at winning this game, particularly being at home, particularly being against yourselves who aren't the best away. We do need to try and look at getting a result. We've not sort of won convincingly in quite a while, so I expect a tough, tight game, and that's credit to yourselves as well. I think you'll make it a tough game, but I do think we've got to be looking at 3 points, and I think we can. I think we can get the 3 points. I'd probably go for a 1-0 win.
Totally understandable. I say this every week. I said it's the Carlisle fan last week who backed his team to come and beat us. Why wouldn't you? You've had a good season. You've been better than us for most of that campaign. But we're a very different Gillingham now to the team that you'd have seen in October. We're a threat in open play. We're still a threat from set pieces because that's how Neil Harris sets his teams up. So we'll probably go direct to Ollie Hawkins and play from there and try and get off of him. You're being positive. Obviously, I'm going to be positive from my point of view. It's an interesting game for me because I think if we come up there and win, that's your playoffs done.
Yeah, definitely.
So if we can score the first goal, then suddenly your fans and players might get a little bit twitchy. Obviously, if you score first, crowd gets up, then it becomes a tough afternoon for us. Our away form's not been brilliant all season. I think we've only won twice on the road, but they have come since the takeover. We're hard to beat. We're keeping clean sheets. So for that reason, I'm going to sit on the fence and say 1-1 final score. I think it'd be a better point for us, don't get me wrong, because they always say if you win the majority of your home games and draw the majority away, then you're going to be all right. And that's what we've done since the takeover over the last 3 months. So for me, 1-1 ticks another game off. I mean, I think we're safe now. I've got no qualms about anyone putting a run together or us dropping off significantly enough for us to get ourselves back into trouble. So 1-1, both can still talk to each other at 5 o'clock. And all the best for the rest of the season, obviously, apart from Saturday afternoon.
Likewise.
No, it's been a real pleasure again, Taylor. So I do appreciate you coming on, like I say. Gills fans, Barrow fans, if you're still watching at this stage, then thank you very much for listening to myself and Taylor. Don't forget, these videos are now in association with Art of Football. So if you're after anything retro or vintage in terms of T-shirts, sweatshirts, bucket hats, I'm not doing the rest of the list. I tell you every week, I tell you every episode, go and check out their website. The link is in the description at the bottom of this video. Come and give us your score predictions. Gills fans, Barrow fans, come and give us your predicted lineups. Let us know what you're thinking in terms of the game on Saturday. I am not travelling up, unfortunately, at this stage of the season. Just shelled out for a season ticket for myself and a little one for next year. So that's a fair chunk that's come out the back pocket this evening. Maybe if there was more riding on it from our point of view, I'd have been more inclined to travel. But I think the season is not drifting because there's still plenty to play for and we could still affect the top positions in the table. But we're safe is what I'm saying. So everyone who is going, be loud, be proud, be safe. Try and bring back the 3 points, at least bring back a point for us. So I'll be back Monday. with Reese from German Gills, hopefully to look back on the game and hopefully reflecting on another positive performance. But until then, up the Gills.